I need help.
I never thought a hotel room could become a gas chamber until I investigated what happened to two Canadian sisters in Thailand back in 2012. What I discovered will make you think twice about every hotel you've ever stayed in. If you've ever pulled back hotel sheets to check for bed bugs, drop "checked" in the comments, because what these girls found under their sheets wasn't bugs at all. It was something far more sinister. June 12, 2012. The humid evening air in Phi Phi Island, Thailand, was thick with the scent of jasmine and street food when 25-year-old Noami Bellanger fumbled with a hotel room keycard. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from the heat, but from exhaustion. 3 weeks of backpacking through Vietnam had left both her and her 20-year-old sister Audrey running on fumes and pure adrenaline. The sound of their rolling suitcases echoed down the narrow hotel corridor as they finally reached their room. The door clicked open and Noami held it for Audrey, who wheeled their bags inside with a sigh of relief. The rush of air conditioning hit them like a wall, and for a moment, both sisters just stood there breathing it in. This wasn't their first rodeo as travelers, but something felt different about this place. Maybe it was the way the hotel clerk had avoided eye contact when he handed them the keys, or how the hallway smelled faintly of chemicals beneath the tropical air freshener. Noami kicked off her sandals and surveyed the room. 2 single beds with crisp white sheets, a small balcony overlooking the beach, everything looking perfectly normal for a mid-range tourist hotel. But years of budget traveling had taught her never to trust appearances. She'd learned the hard way in hostels across Southeast Asia that you always check the beds first. "I'm going to shower," Audrey announced, already heading toward the bathroom. "We're meeting João and Carlos in 2 hours, and I need to look human again." Noami nodded, but her attention was focused on the beds. Something about the way the sheets were tucked seemed almost too perfect, too tight. She walked over to her bed and grabbed the corner of the top sheet. As she pulled it back, she noticed the fabric felt slightly damp and had an odd chemical smell, like someone had sprayed it with cleaning solution. The mattress beneath looked spotless, no stains, no signs of wear. Too clean, almost sterile. "Beds look good," she called out to Audrey, though something in her gut whispered otherwise. She let the sheet fall back into place and flopped down on top of it, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling crawling up her spine. The Brazilian guys they'd met in Vietnam had been a pleasant surprise. João and Carlos were charming, funny, and most importantly, they seemed genuinely interested in the girls as people, not just another conquest. When they'd discovered their travel itineraries overlapped in Thailand, it felt like fate. But now, lying on this bed that smelled faintly of pesticide, Noami wondered if some coincidences were too good to be true. She pulled out her phone to call her parents, then remembered Audrey's warning about the time difference. Their parents had been nervous enough about 2 young women traveling alone through Southeast Asia. The last thing they needed was a middle-of-the-night panic call. But that nagging voice in her head kept telling her to make the call anyway, to tell someone where they were, what they were doing. She stared at her phone for a long moment before finally putting it away. If you're getting an uneasy feeling about where this is heading, you should be, because what happened next would turn this tropical paradise into something out of a nightmare. Later that evening, the beach outside the reggae bar was alive with the kind of energy that only exists in places where reality feels suspended. String lights swayed between palm trees, casting dancing shadows on the sand where dozens of tourists moved to the rhythm of Bob Marley covers played by a local band. The air was thick with the smell of grilled fish, coconut oil, and something else Noami couldn't quite identify, something sweet and chemical. João and Carlos were easy to spot, each holding what looked like a child's beach bucket filled with ice and some kind of colorful liquid. They waved the girls over with huge grins, and Noami noticed their eyes were already glassy with whatever they'd been drinking. "Welcome to Thailand, ladies," Carlos shouted over the music, holding up his bucket like a trophy. You haven't lived until you've tried a Four Loko Thai style. Audrey's eyes lit up immediately. What's in it? That's the beauty, Joao laughed. Nobody really knows. It's different every time. Local secret recipe. The buckets were enormous, easily holding 2 liters of liquid each. The contents looked like a rainbow had melted into ice, with layers of different colored liquids swirling together. Other tourists around them had similar buckets, everyone laughing and stumbling slightly as they drank from them with long straws. Noami hesitated. The responsible big sister voice in her head was screaming warnings, but the exhausted traveler voice was louder, telling her to relax, to live a little. When in Rome, right? Besides, everyone else seemed fine, and the guys had clearly been drinking the same stuff. Come on, Noami, Audrey pleaded, already reaching for one of the buckets. We're in paradise. Live a little. The first sip was sweet, almost cloying, with a strange aftertaste that burned slightly going down. By the third sip, she could feel it hitting her system faster than any alcohol she'd ever consumed. Her vision started to blur around the edges, and colors seemed more vivid. The music felt like it was coming from inside her head. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that these weren't just strong drinks. They were chemical cocktails containing crushed-up narcotics, cough syrup, Coca-Cola, and sometimes DEET, the main ingredient in mosquito repellent. Legal in Thailand because the local authorities looked the other way, but toxic enough to send your liver into overdrive trying to process the poison. Hours passed in a blur of dancing, swimming in the warm ocean under the stars, and consuming more of those deceptively sweet buckets. By 1 a.m., Nomi's world was spinning, but in the best possible way. When Joao suggested they head back to the hotel, she readily agreed. The responsible part of her brain had long since been chemically silenced. "Audrey, we're heading back," she called to her sister, who was grinding against Carlos to a reggae version of No Woman No Cry. "Already?" Audrey pouted, her words slurred. "The night's just getting started. You sure you don't want to come?" "Nah, we're having too much fun. See you back at the room soon." It was the last conversation the sisters would ever have. If you've ever made a decision while intoxicated that you later regretted, drop regret in the comments, because what happened next shows how quickly a fun night can turn into something unthinkable. Noami woke up in her hotel bed at 6 a.m. to the sound of the door closing. Her head felt like it had been split with an axe, and her mouth tasted like she'd been chewing on batteries. Through her blurred vision, she could see Joao getting dressed by the window. The room smelled strange, like chemicals and something else she couldn't identify. "Where's Carlos?" she mumbled, her tongue feeling thick and foreign. "He left with Audrey about an hour ago," Joao replied, not meeting her eyes. "They went to get breakfast." Something about his tone didn't sit right, but her brain felt wrapped in cotton. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun violently. Her skin felt clammy, and there was a metallic taste in her mouth that hadn't been there the night before. "I don't feel so good," she whispered. Joao was already at the door. "You just need to sleep it off. Those drinks hit hard the first time. Carlos and I felt the same way yesterday." After he left, Noami tried to get up to check on Audrey, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. Every movement felt like wading through thick syrup. She managed to pull her phone from the nightstand and saw several missed calls from her parents. The time showed 6:15 a.m. local time, which meant it was evening back home in Quebec. Perfect time to call. But when she tried to dial, her fingers wouldn't work properly on the screen. The numbers seemed to shift and blur. That's when she noticed something that made her blood run cold, even through the chemical fog clouding her brain. There were small spots of blood on her pillow, and when she touched her gums, they came away crimson. She tried to call out for Audrey, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. The room was spinning faster now, and she could taste copper in her mouth. Something was very, very wrong, but her body wouldn't obey her commands to get help. What she didn't know was that she was breathing poison with every breath, absorbing toxins through her skin with every moment she remained in that bed. The sheets she was lying on had been treated with phosphine gas to kill bedbugs, an illegal practice that was turning hotel rooms across Thailand into gas chambers. But that wasn't even the most terrifying part of what was happening to her. The next 3 days passed in a haze of confusion and growing horror for the hotel staff. Housekeeping had knocked on the girls' room multiple times without getting an answer. The "Do Not Disturb" sign had been hanging on the door since that first night, but by the 3rd day, the smell seeping under the door told them something was seriously wrong. When the housekeeper finally used her master key to enter the room on June 15th, her screams could be heard 3 floors down. Both sisters were in their respective beds, tucked neatly under the sheets, surrounded by pools of vomit that had dried into the mattresses. Their skin had a greyish pallor, and dried blood crusted their gums and fingernails. Lieutenant Colonel Rat Sombo had seen his share of tourist deaths in Thailand, but something about this scene bothered him immediately. The room was too clean, too organized for what appeared to be a violent death by poisoning. There was no sign of struggle, no evidence of forced entry. It was as if the girls had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. His first instinct was alcohol poisoning from those bucket drinks, but the blood under their fingernails suggested something more sinister. Defensive wounds, maybe? But defensive against what? The toxicology report would take weeks, and he needed answers now. The hotel manager was nervous, sweating despite the air conditioning as he answered Sombo's questions. "We treat all our rooms for pests," he admitted reluctantly. "It's necessary in this climate. Guests complain about bugs. What kind of treatment? Standard procedures. Nothing dangerous." But Sombo had been a cop long enough to recognize a lie when he heard one. The way the manager's eyes darted around the room, avoiding the bed specifically, told him everything he needed to know. These weren't the first tourists to die in Thai hotel rooms under mysterious circumstances, and they wouldn't be the last. What he didn't yet realize was that he was looking at the scene of a mass murder disguised as an accident, and the weapon was invisible, odorless, and had been deliberately placed in the one spot every tired traveler would inevitably end up. The investigation that followed would expose a cover-up that reached the highest levels of Thai tourism authorities, but by then it would be far too late for Noami and Audrey Bellanger. When the Brazilian men were finally tracked down by Interpol, their story seemed to confirm Sombo's worst fears. Both João and Carlos had become violently ill after their night with the sisters, spending the next 2 days vomiting and unable to leave their hotel beds. They'd barely made their flight back to Brazil, and they genuinely seemed shocked to learn the girls had died. "We thought it was just the drinks," Carlos told investigators. "Everyone gets sick from those things. We figured the girls would recover like we did." But that's when the timeline started to make terrifying sense. The men had only been in the room for a few hours total. They'd spent most of the night on the beach, only coming back to the hotel around 4 a.m. The girls, however, had been sleeping in those treated beds for 3 full nights, breathing in concentrated poison for hours at a time. The drinks hadn't killed them. The DEET and narcotics in those bucket cocktails had certainly made them sick, but not lethally so. No, what killed Noami and Audrey Bellanger was something much more insidious, something that hotels across Southeast Asia were using routinely, illegally, and with complete disregard for human life. Dr. René Roussel, the Canadian coroner who performed the second autopsy, made the connection that Thai authorities had either missed or deliberately ignored. Phosphine gas exposure, the same chemical used in fumigation and pest control, illegally applied to hotel bedding to kill bed bugs quickly and cheaply. These girls were essentially gassed to death in their sleep, Dr. Roussel told reporters. This wasn't an accident. This was criminal negligence on a massive scale. Her investigation revealed that between 2009 and 2015, at least 20 tourists had died under similar circumstances across Thailand. Young, healthy backpackers who'd checked into budget hotels and never checked out. All found in their beds, all with the same mysterious blood under their fingernails and in their gums, all initially blamed on alcohol poisoning or drug overdoses. The phosphine gas, applied to kill bed bugs, would dissipate within hours of treatment. By the time the bodies were discovered days later, the gas was undetectable. The perfect crime, committed thousands of times across the region, disguised as tourist misadventures and covered up by authorities more concerned with protecting the tourism industry than tourist lives. But here's the part that will make your blood run cold. When Dr. Roussel published her findings and the international media picked up the story, exposing this deadly practice, do you know what happened to the hotel where Noami and Audrey died? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's still operating today, still taking bookings from unsuspecting travelers, still treating their beds with illegal pesticides. Not a single person was ever arrested. Not a single hotel was shut down. The Thai government issued a statement expressing sympathy for the families and promising to investigate, but that investigation quietly disappeared, just like dozens of other tourists had disappeared into those chemically treated beds.